I've been thinking about the phrase violence doesn't solve a thing. Whoever came up with that one, I don't think you've been paying attention to history now, have you? Alright, lads, it's me, the Irish Alchemist, here with another one of my random thoughts. Um, and, this one is it's going to be a little tricky as such, right? But I'll see if I can get it right here as such. Like I said, I think maybe this one came one day when I sat down and thought about, the world we live in right now and how exactly it came to be. Right. I also want to say I'm a bit of a history buff, right? Primarily military history. So that's sort of where it sort of just came together as such. I thought about it myself and I thought, can I name any country in the world that has not been either created, maintained, or destroyed through the use of war? Now, of course, when I talk about violence, that's mainly what I'm going to be talking about here, right? Is primarily war, but like, I'm talking about small conflicts as such, all right? So, as I said, you know, violence doesn't solve a thing, all right? I, well, as I said, you really haven't paid attention to history, have you? So, I mean, like, there's times whenever I feel that violence really is the only answer. That's the only answer that's really left as such, right? And I also want to make a clear point here that I do not condone violence, right? I don't like violence. I wish there was no violence in this world, but to be honest, we're only human, and human nature is it is conflict. I mean, I think it was Winston Churchill said that the way of man is war. All right. I mean, for the last near millennia as such, we have been fighting wars and killing each other. It's the way. It's a natural order, guys. All right. I'm sorry to say, but it is. Okay. So, first, I want to start off by saying, in what cases do I personally believe that war was necessary? And to be honest, I would go as far as to say is near enough every single revolution that has occurred in really any country in the world as such. Although I would maybe narrow that down a little bit actually and say things like, revolutions that overthrew monarchies in Europe. I say those would be some of the ones in which case violence was absolutely the only option that was left. But of course, the main one, of course, one of the biggest and most well-known, of course, being obviously the American Revolution. All right, because obviously, a lot of people in America weren't very happy about being, taxed without representation. So, war was really the only option. And of course, this is where we get to the results, right? So the American Revolution led to one really big, huge result: the creation of, the United States. All right. So that's another point I want to make as such is that war and violence, it does get results, but I'm also going to make a point to say not all results are good, but we'll get to that in a minute. All right. So yes, I mean the overthrow of democracies. Even whenever the French Revolution happened, the monarchy was abolished because it was overthrown because at the time France was in an absolute state, and like the monarchy had to go and democracies were put in place. Although a little later down the line, actually, after the French Revolution, the king was deposed and Napoleon took over. But I'm getting off a little track here. Such it took a little while for the French Republic to be actually established as such. But people were better for it in the end. All right. So yeah, I mean, those are just examples of revolutions where violence was needed. Although not all revolutions have been successful. I mean, even here in Ireland, there's a lot of revolutions that happened, and they failed. Nice one, Theobald Wolfe. Yeah. So as I said, I mean, like the world has been formed. Borders have been formed through war. Right? I mean, if you look back at maps in like the 1700s, the 1800s, even after World War One, as such, I mean, like Germany lost a good portion of its territory after World War One. So like there's examples of borders that have been drawn up, and even after Europe, I mean, Germany was split in two. Germany's been torn up and rebuilt for years. So I mean, it's quite sad to see that happen. So yes, there have been times where yes, war has been necessary, but there's been a lot of other times where war has really not been needed. All right. I mean, speaking of World War One, that war I don't think should have happened. I don't think a war should have happened. Now, bear in mind though that Europe at that time was an absolute powder keg, and I think the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, that was just the match that just somebody just dropped on the on the powder as such, right? So, but I mean that war should have happened because it was literally a domino effect, and all the countries got dragged into it because of the military alliances that they had with each other. I do apologize about the Discord noise. Some of my buds are talking and such. So, I mean, World War War, I think, was a war that you could very well have easily been avoided as such. And another example, the Franco-Prussian War. This came before World War One. Right? That was when Otto von Bismarck wanted to unite, the German states together, and he figured the only way to do that there was by triggering a war. I mean, he basically taunted the French into a war that united the German people, and at least 3 million people died for it. That was not needed. There could have been other ways to do that as such. So I mean, there was examples where war and violence was really not needed, and there's been all times in history where violence hasn't solved the problem. I mean, you look at the Northern Ireland Troubles, 30 years, of violence and absolute misery, and what happened in the end, the Good Friday Agreement, but that was a matter of peace. That was not through violence. That was peace. Talking there, lads. Right? And there's even times whenever wars has gone and made things worse. I mean, the second invasion of Iraq, for God's sake, you threw Saddam, out there, and what happened? There was a nice big power vacuum, and all of a sudden we've got ISIS. Well done, folks. Well done. And these are just some of a few examples that I have. I'm sure there's been plenty of other ones. And there's times in history whenever violence has not been the answer, but peace, peace has been the answer. I mean, look at some of the best examples there. I mean, Gandhi, instigated a policy of pacifism, all right, and he ended colonial involvement, in India, and Nelson Mandela as well. He brought down barriers by negotiating, the end to the South African apartheid, and Martin Luther King, although the Junior, yes, he advocated peaceful protesting, but unfortunately, that was it was his death. Well, I don't know actually. I mean, he died, and then the civil rights act was passed not long after. So I mean, bills in America, they don't just pass in days. I mean, it takes a little time. So I think it was in the works anyway. But I think his death was just sort of that's what really capped it off as such. So, but I mean, those are things on grand scales, I think. All right, and I don't know, I just think violence, it gets results, but not always good results. I mean, violence can solve a lot of things. It can make things worse. Sometimes it's not needed. Sometimes peace is a better alternative. But personally, I think violence and war should always be the last resort, the absolute last resort. But of course, the problem is these days is that people just couldn't be bothered sitting down and talking about it. They would just rather give in to mankind's innate nature and just go to war. I mean, mankind is capable of some incredibly horrible things, but they're also capable of some very good things too. I mean, personally, one of my favorite moments in history, the example of humanity at its absolute greatest, was the Christmas truce of 1914. Now, again, guys, I'm sort of veering off the path here as such, but as I said, these videos, they're not rehearsed. They're just rehearsed. They're not scripted. They're just rehearsed. But I mean, go back to the point here. I mean, in 1914, German and British and French and all out there, they got out of the trenches. They shook hands. They exchanged gifts. They played football together. But yet the next day, they went straight back to their trenches and they just got straight back to war. I mean, that's for me, is one of humanity's finest ever moments. And sometimes I really wish, guys, that we could have more moments like that. The problem is, violence is our first resort, but it really shouldn't be. So admittedly, guys, I do apologize if that was a bit morbid as such, but that was just my random thought for the day. And of course, as I said, my random thoughts leads on to other random thoughts. And, I had to do a bit of research for this one as such to make sure I got my facts straight, as someone clearly pointed out to me previously. So if you like what you saw there, guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You agree or disagree with me, and be sure to leave a comment below. And leave once again, guys, with the usual meme that says, just don't think happy thoughts, think random thoughts.